Welcome to today's episode of Newsflash. We have a very, very exciting announcement for you today. We're obviously going to be talking to Virgil Texas, and we got right in it. I'm not going to delay anymore because we talked about a lot of great things, including impeachment, climate change, and things to do when it comes to saving our planet, and of course, the 2020 race and his strong feelings on the matter. But we're going to get right into it. We start our discussion with impeachment. Let's pick it right up with Chapo Trap House's Virgil Texas, the interview. Thank you so much for listening. And thanks, by the way, to Virgil for taking the time to do this.
I do want to get your view on, of course, impeachment, which has been a big subject really since the birth of his presidency, or the beginning of his presidency, with the Russia scandal. And based on your, from up until this point, like, what has been your take on impeachment as the Russia scandal has kind of unfolded over the last 2 years or so?
I mean, certainly Trump should be impeached, but I think it really has nothing to do with any of the Russian interference shit, any of the Mueller report stuff. I mean, unless you want to get him on like a concept of obstruction of justice, which I believe he obstructed justice, but it's subjective enough that I think it would just not it would not do what impeachment should do, which is make a clear and specific and evidence-backed case for the president's criminality. I think the emoluments clause is what you impeach him on. I think any of the various corrupt dealings among the president and his family and his top people in his administration are grounds for impeachment.
What would you say, because obviously we talk about corrupt dealings and some people in his administration, there has been in the news some major allegations against Trump and Rudy Giuliani that he asked the Ukrainian president to look into Joe Biden's son, I believe, dealing with some natural gas or some kind of scandal that I don't really know too much about. So I'm guessing what you would say is that kind of adds to, the idea was that Ukraine would investigate it and possibly come up with a report on it that would smear Joe Biden and maybe even help Trump in exchange for some sort of aid, which he has been holding back apparently. So,
right.
Yeah, would you think that would probably?
Well, ironically, the Root scandal involves Hunter Biden taking a position he wasn't qualified for at a Ukrainian firm, whose head was under investigation for corruption. And ironically, the underlying allegation concerns the vice president applying political pressure in order to essentially materially benefit his family. And now we're in the opposite position where it's the president applying political pressure using his office in order to materially benefit his reelection prospects. I mean, it's just another one of those things, isn't it? It's what we've all come to expect. I mean, it's very tin pot dictator stuff, and it's really what we've all come to expect after 2.5 years. I wouldn't say, that any one thing here is a silver bullet. I think you can compile an effective list of charges, and you could impeach him on 20 counts, and you're probably leaving out 500 other things, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say there kind of is no silver bullet that will rise up in the rest, but more of a compilation will be interesting. Like, do you think, like, based on what we've seen...
It's very Mr. Burns with the diseases, he's corrupt in every single way, which makes it impossible to really nail him on one thing.
Yeah, there's just and it seems like the most interesting thing is that somehow, out of all the situations and all the stuff over the course of Donald Trump's life that he's managed to get himself into, the Democrats picked the one that would probably yield the least results, which is kind of a
right, the election interference. Well, I mean, the real, the real reason why is because they wanted some material evidence that Hillary Clinton didn't actually lose the election.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy to go down that route, because unless you're already on that side, which, of course, majority of people didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, to everyone else it just looks like sore loser shit. And to some degree it kind of is.
Yeah, and definitely kind of the people who I'd say were pushing this were probably the closest to Hillary Clinton's campaign.
I mean, when I think who's pushing this, I mean, I think MSNBC pushing this for higher ratings. I think a lot of cranks on the internet, and I think a lot of journalists who should know better, or, maybe they just don't know any better, pushing this sort of thing. And I think that, various Democratic politicians and the DNC think, okay, this is really good. We can fundraise off this. And we can also keep people in this state of expectation that, one day day's going to come and, Trump's going to be taken down. And it's cynical. It's venal. It's giving people an idea of false hope. I'm sorry, you had a second part of that?
Oh, yeah. Pretty much, yeah, that's kind of what I was kind of getting into there. But do you think, like, in terms of impeachment, like, it kind of seems weird. Like, do you think it should, you would for it happening, like, in the span of, like, you say press the button right now, let's go, let's do it?
I mean, at minimum, so there's a certain process here. You've got to assemble the investigation and put together a committee with subpoena power or go through an established committee. And they can't even get a majority in the House, and they have a majority in the House, to agree to an investigation and to agree to begin an impeachment investigation. And that in itself is troubling.
In terms, with Jerry.
As I understand it, the whip count from Politico, which asks not would you vote yes on impeachment, but would you vote yes for opening an impeachment inquiry? It stands like something like 150, maybe 170 Democrats
versus what, like 300 representatives in total, 300 odd.
I think 245 odd Democrats are in the House.
So yeah, that's probably a little 50. So it's nowhere near like a 90, 100% kind of majority of Democrats, like the way you would expect. But do you think
when these Democrats were effectively elected because of the backlash against Trump, where their own party, the people who identify as Democratic voters, support impeachment by like 80-90% or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I would definitely say that the appetite, and I'm sure as you would too, just look at the polling and stuff like that, at least for the Democratic Party, to kind of pursue impeachment is there. But like, this question kind of extends both to like really Nancy Pelosi in a whole. Like, she represents a liberal base. She wants to do what's best for the Democratic Party. Like, why isn't she initiating kind of this turn? Do you have any guesses as to why that may be?
Yeah, so Pelosi was in this position before, right, in 2007, when there was a strong movement within the Democratic ranks to impeach George W. Bush, and she just said no. And I think the reasoning there was it would look, we would look like we're politicizing things. And as well, she's, for as much as the right doesn't like Nancy Pelosi and thinks she's a San Francisco liberal, she's really not on the left wing of the Democratic caucus. She's somewhere to the center, and I think she, having been the leader of that caucus since the early 2000s for over 15 years now, I think has given her a sense that she should be in the middle of that caucus and that she should try to use the authority of that position in order to pursue a national legislative strategy that might not necessarily be the most politically correct thing to do or even morally correct thing to do, but whatever she thinks would benefit the electoral prospects of the Democratic Party. And right now I assume her calculation is more or less what she says publicly, and it's also what Chuck Schumer says, which is that if we impeach Trump, if we went through this whole process and then we wrote up the articles of impeachment and then we sent that to the Senate, there's no way the Senate would remove him from office, which is true, which is absolutely correct. Mm-hmm. The real dispute is over whether it makes sense to impeach him, even if it were impossible to remove him from office. And I side with the people who say that yes, you should impeach him, because there must be some. It has two pragmatic benefits. I mean, one is you're not letting him get away with it to a certain degree. You're at least saying, okay, I don't have the power to actually remove him from office, but I am going to register my willingness to do so, and I'm going to register my condemnation of his criminality. By refusing to impeach, as Democrats should have, say, during the Reagan administration, you're really just contributing to the expanded powers of the presidency, the expansion of the power of the presidency, and the notion that the president and the people who serve the president are above the law. This dovetails, say, with Obama administration's refusal to prosecute figures from the Bush administration over torture. And that's very, very unhealthy in this country. If you're someone who really cares about what the framers thought, what the Constitution says, you should be appalled by that idea of essentially an autocratic presidency. But the other practical reason is that yes, okay, it will, by having these impeachment hearings and then compiling a list of impeachment bills and then voting on them, we will specify the extent of the criminality of the president. And the theory is that record itself is valuable. As well, I mean, there is the idea that what else are you going to do? When was the last time anyone paid attention to what the House Democrats have done? The House of Representatives is supposed to be a very powerful institution. If every single Democratic member of Congress voted in one direction, they could stop the brutality and the carnage going on in the American border. They can compel the Trump administration to honor, say, refugee laws, to treat migrants with dignity. And that's even without the approval of the Senate. But they don't use that power. So at this point, why even have it?
Yeah, I think that's definitely very interesting as to what you were saying. And the idea that I first heard on your guys' show that I thought was that's an interesting point. It's like the Democrats, as they're currently structured now, I'm not talking about all the Democrats, some of them obviously want to bring some change, not just AOC, but some of the people in the caucus, but really the leadership would much rather kind of not be in power, because when you get in power, there's an expectation that you need to do something to bring some sort of leftist change, and that's something, or not even really leftist change, but somewhat any kind of progressive change. And that's something
that's the more conspiratorial idea, which I think there's a certain truth to that. That just based on our understanding of human nature and big organizations, that people like Pelosi and President Schumer would rather be at the helm of a losing organization of a party that's a minority in both houses, and therefore they don't have any responsibilities, than they would be at the helm or at a reduced position in an organization that has a majority and has a governing responsibility. But I do believe that Pelosi does not want Donald Trump to be president, and I do trust that there is a logic there to reckon with about whether or not it makes political sense to impeach the president, because the one counter argument to impeachment is that you might impeach the president, and then you might send that to the Senate, and then the Senate refuses to remove him from office. And then Trump can go and say,